Before we start, would you please join me in a moment of silence for the victims in Las Vegas? Thank you. Would you all rise and join me in the pledge of allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call of attendance. Doug Teagarden. Present. Jeff. Here. Catherine.
Here.
I'm here. Bob.
Here.
Jody.
Here.
And Jerry. The special meeting is called at the request of the Board of Supervisors to request the Donegal Township Planning Commission to hold a special meeting October 2nd, 2017, 5:30 p.m. The meeting comes to the municipal complex to confirm and/or consider for recommendation the zoning ordinance dated 5/25/2017 and the zoning map dated 6/15/2017. Have a motion?
I move that we send the zoning ordinance dated 5/25/2017 and the zoning map dated 6/15/2017 to the Board of Supervisors of Donegal Township for their consideration.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Comments? JD?
Two things. First of all, the flags, the eagles should be facing forward. I'm sure you're aware of that. Correct that. Shouldn't somebody else make the motion other than Doug, being how Doug is a supervisor, so he's in a sense voting to send it himself? I guess that's a question for Kearney, I guess.
If he wasn't a member of the planning commission, but he is a member of the planning commission. So as a member of the planning commission,
Right.
he has all the rights and privileges of anyone else that's a member of the planning commission.
I understand that. My question is, since he is also a supervisor, he's voting to send it to himself. Wouldn't it be more appropriate for somebody else to make the motion? Mr. Kearney, is that
I mean,
Any
he has the right
problem
to
or-
make the motion.
no problem?
I see no comment.
Okay. Good enough?
Any other comment?
Wait,
Dave?
can I just speak
Yes.
briefly? So again, as everyone understands why we're here, if you recall back in May, I think it was May 23rd, the planning commission voted, and I forget the exact vote, either 4-3 or 4-2, and one,
4-3.
essentially 4-3 was the vote, subject to changes that were discussed in a public meeting being sent to the Board of Supervisors. That draft that ultimately got sent to the Board of Supervisors is the draft that is on this motion. It's the draft that's dated 5/25/17, as well as the zoning map, which is dated 6/15/17?
Yeah.
6/15/17. So what's in front of you today, and what you're being asked to do, is to confirm that that is the document that you are recommending, and to revote that you recommend it or not. And so that's the motion to be put in front of you. No, the motion is, well, he's
I
saying.
think that's two different things.
Well, no, they're asking you to confirm that is what was voted on. If you believe that there are changes and or inaccuracies in this, that would be a time, this now would be a time to bring that up. And then the second motion, that's what I'm saying, I think it should be two things. One would be to confirm that you have no issues with what was sent to the supervisors, because the motion that was ultimately made back in May was.
Is the motion that's on the floor improper if it's a withdrawal?
Yeah, I would withdraw that
I
motion.
will withdraw the motion.
Okay, so I don't, to be perfectly honest with you, I don't think you need to confirm what was in front of you. You brought that up, that was with the motion, but looking at it, I think the only thing really in front of the planning commission now is whether or not this ordinance and the map that are dated 5/25 and 6/15 respectively should be recommended to the board, sent up to the Board of Supervisors. That's all that needs to be in front of the planning commission today.
What would that motion be?
It would be a motion to recommend for consideration the zoning ordinance draft dated 5/25/17 and the zoning map dated 6/15/17. That would be the motion. And again, just to,
Do you have that, Jerry?
No. I thought someone else would want to say it, whatever he's saying. since-
because one of the questions was back in one of the legal questions that was brought up in the litigation was whether or not the planning commission had to have the final draft that they were voting on in front of them, or if they could make the motion subject to the changes discussed in the public meeting being incorporated therein. In order to eliminate that question and talking to counsel from the Donegal Freedom Group, it was agreed that instead of going through the courts, through battling that out, drawing out, wasting money, wasting time, a simple solution would be to bring this back in front of the planning commission, to have the document in its form with the changes that were discussed at the May meeting. Everything's been incorporated herein, so the motion would just be to vote on these two documents tonight. We don't have to worry about confirming
Okay.
previous
Gives a
actions.
wording that's necessary to accomplish.
You're voting on whether or not to recommend the 5/25, 2017 zoning ordinance and the 6/15, 2017
Okay, then I would
zoning.
move that we recommend the zoning ordinance dated 5/25/2017 and the zoning map dated 6/15/2017. Is that covered?
Is that covered, Mike?
Yeah, that-
Okay. Do I have a second to that motion? Second. Any further comment?
Well, I have a question then. So it doesn't matter if we've seen that or not then, to see what changes you made in it?
No, you should, this is the document, this is the draft.
How long has the draft been available?
Were we supposed to just get it online or?
May.
It's been in the
May
township
25, May
office,
26,
it's
I'm not sure.
online, there's copies here,
So we were supposed to pick up a copy?
most people
You'll look
did.
at it online.
We're looking online.
I admit I didn't.
I did not even, I didn't even. We're supposed to, whatever.
I have another question,
Sure.
and I don't want to drag this out, but how did this get back to the planning commission in the first place? Not the most recent incident, before that, when we took the vote on it the first time.
How did it get,
What went to court over some issue, came back to the planning commission, had to do something. What was that something, and did we accomplish that something?
the agreement, the court agreement was that you would go according to the MPC. One of the requirements under the municipality's planning code was that the planning commission have at least one public hearing related to a zoning ordinance. The planning commission, since I was involved, met in January, February, March, April, maybe twice in April, and in May. So that aspect of it, in my opinion, was satisfied by the planning commission by having a public meeting. The next step was to vote on it, to recommend it. The reason why it's back here now is one of the questions that was raised subsequent to that was that the motion that was made was to recommend the ordinance to the supervisors, subject to the changes that were discussed in the open meetings being incorporated therein. The argument that was raised in court was that the planning commission should have to have the final draft, or, the complete draft. It can't be made subject to XYZ being incorporated. Those have to be incorporated and then in front of the planning commission. That's a question for the court. However, it was agreed between legal counsel for the Donegal Freedom Group, who raised that question, and the supervisors agreed that instead of litigating that, instead of going in front of the court, filing briefs, taking depositions, testimony, a simple solution would be to have those drafts back in front of the planning commission to vote on it and recommend. That's why this motion is not subject to XYZ being incorporated there and sent up to them, because that was the question. So this draft is what's in front of the planning commission being asked to recommend. If it successfully, if a majority vote to do so, it would go to the Board of Supervisors and eliminate that question in front of the court. That's essentially what.
Do they have to hold another public hearing on it?
Who?
The board.
That would be my suggestion. That hasn't been decided in court and hasn't been discussed, first baby steps, I guess. The first issue right now is whether or not the planning commission has completed its task. A question raised was that the complete draft was not in front of the planning commission to give approval. To eliminate that hearing and to eliminate that, it was agreed upon to be brought back here for the planning commission to review. My opinion would be that following, again, this is assuming that a majority, 4-3 or whatever it is, if a majority vote to recommend it, my recommendation to the board would be to pick up right from there and to send it to the Washington County Planning Commission for their review period, to have a public hearing as required by the MPC. I guess the legal argument can be made that they've already satisfied that. That's not the position I would recommend taking, but I'm not speaking on behalf of the supervisors right now. I'm just speaking on behalf of the recommendation, with speaking with counsel for Donegal Freedom Group and speaking to the supervisors, what the recommendation to remedy the question that is in front of the planning commission.
Mr. Crenny, just a point of clarification. The Board of Supervisors have already voted on that proposal previously.
Correct.
And there was a motion taken before the Court of Common Pleas to ask the judge to strike down the ordinance, to declare it invalid, and to keep us from moving forward on it. And if I'm not mistaken, the judge crossed all that out. And the only thing that he granted was a hearing on the matter.
Correct. Correct.
I'm
There's a
just- I'm just-
there's a hearing scheduled for October 25th.
Mhm.
Prior to that is a chance to do discovery.
Sure.
One of, you received notice of depositions previously. It was agreed upon after speaking with counsel that there would be no need to take the depositions of the planning commission members towards this issue if this issue becomes moot. If this hearing does not render that question moot, then depositions would have to, go forward. That's not an answer, I can't guarantee that. My understanding after talking to Attorney Furman is that if this document is not changed and a vote is made, there would be no need, because the question regarding the planning commission's role in this would no longer be in front of the court. That's my understanding.
Mr. Kearney,
Yes.
I got a question, because that's about as clear as mud. I believe what Doug's saying is inaccurate. I was at that hearing. The judge set the hearing date
Correct.
to discuss all this, to sort all this out, because didn't have enough time, that was just motions court, that was not hearing court. So he set a hearing to sort all this out. There was depositions set,
Yes.
those got postponed, and this special meeting got scheduled.
Correct.
And then the depositions were to take place or not take place after the special meeting, but the first set got canceled, okay?
Correct.
So that's what the hearing's for, to hear the validity of the complaint or whatever. He did not strike anything or throw it out. He set a
He
hearing.
didn't throw it out, he
set a
amended the
hearing.
order request. That's what Doug's referring to.
Set a
He
hearing
amended
to
the order.
hear it.
But the hearing
That's
date
not
is
what he
scheduled
stated.
for October 25th, correct?
But that is not what Mr. Teagardin stated.
The actual document, JD, if you look at the judge's order, somebody put a line through everything but just setting the date of the hearing. And my understanding, that was the judge who crossed it out.
He didn't make a decision on the matter. He said
I understand that. I'm
hearing
just,
to
I'm just
decide.
going on what the actual order said, the physical order.
Do you have a copy of that order with you?
I don't have that. It's a public record.
Does the board have a copy? Sort of an important thing, I would think.
The order scheduling, that would have been sent to the board.
No, I'm saying that the board in front of them, they're being asked to take action. I think that's an important document that should be in front of them for consideration when, if they're not
It's
sure.
not, that document wouldn't have any bearing on the planning commission right now.
Okay.
That's just, they're not scheduled to attend If they were called as witnesses, they would, they would be subpoenaed if a party, if they didn't want to come, or, they would be asked to come to that hearing date. As far as I'm concerned, there's no need to have, from my standpoint, that could change based on what happens tonight and based on my conversations with Attorney Furman. As I said, the two main issues that were raised, one was regarding the Planning Commission. The idea behind the depositions were questions were going to be asked of them about that hearing, about the different meetings, I assume. I can't speak on behalf of Attorney Furman, but the main issue with that was the fact that the ordinance that was recommended in May was subject to changes being incorporated as discussed in the meetings. In order to alleviate that or to render that moot, this entire document with no other changes being presented to be made is in front of the Planning Commission tonight. That's what's in front of the Planning Commission. The other issue regarding a question raised as to what the supervisors did or how they adopted it, that's still out there. Whether the supervisors take steps in their eyes or in the court's eyes to remedy that, or in the Donegal Freedom Group's eyes to remedy that and not have to have the hearing, I can't speak to that, one step at a time. That's what's in front of the Planning Commission, is this ordinance in full to be voted on. If it's voted upon to be recommended without any changes, that renders the first aspect of the complaint no longer relevant.
So
My understand, again, without speaking for Attorney Furman, but that's my understanding of the position of the Donegal Freedom Group. And that's the reason why the depositions were postponed until after this, because there may be no need to discuss the Planning Commission members to question them any further if this goes through tonight.
Okay, so let me try to get this clear for the record in a moment. Do you have something to say, Mrs. Prescott?
Nothing.
Okay. So what you're saying is, if they vote on that tonight, as it is, what you're saying, that circumvents the whole process of what was intended from the get-go. In other words, what this meeting was set for and advertised for, and what the motion was back at the May 23rd meeting, when Mrs. Gilmore, I believe, is the one that made the motion to recommend to send that with the changes. You're saying if they take action on that tonight, then that circumvents that, and it doesn't matter whether there's changes in there or not. So technically, that's not the motion that was made back then, and that's not what they agreed upon. So
I guess I don't understand what you, no, what's in front of them now is that the ordinance dated 5/25. Is that what they recommend to go to the supervisors? That's what's in front of the board right now.
Okay.
If this ordinance dated 5/25/17 and the zoning map dated 6/15/17 reflect the changes that they discussed and agreed upon in public meetings.
But you said it doesn't matter if they're in there or not. If they take action on it, that's irrelevant, that is a moot point. Is that,
What do you mean?
What I understand.
I don't understand the question.
I thought I just heard you say that you stated whether they're not in there, whether those changes are in there or not, it doesn't matter if they agree to send this forward, that's irrelevant. It's a moot point.
The argument the previous argument in front of the court, yeah, it becomes irrelevant. It doesn't matter what happened then, because this would satisfy that issue being raised.
Okay, so what they had before them at that meeting, initially that was to sort this out, as I understood it. If that's not the case, and they don't have to have those changes, then I.
Well, I don't understand what you mean they don't have to have those changes.
Well,
The
at that-
changes that they discussed at that meeting were incorporated into a draft. That's this draft in front of them right now, to be voted on. The issue raised was that those changes that were voted upon to be incorporated were not in front of them in text form when they voted at the May 23rd meeting. Because they made the motion to approve it subject to XYZ being put in.
Right.
XYZ was put in, that's why it's dated after that meeting. The question that was raised was, you can't, they allege in the complaint that you cannot make essentially you can't make a motion to incorporate things. You have to have them incorporated in and be in front of you in text form to vote on it. So, those were incorporated on May 25th and in June 16th or June 15th. That is what is in front of the board right now, the planning commission members. So those changes have been incorporated. It's not circumventing or anything of that nature. There's a question has been raised in front of the court. In order to eliminate that question moving forward, it was agreed with counsel for the Donegal Freedom Group and with the Board of Supervisors to just bring this back, the documents unchanged since they were, since the motion was made, they were incorporated there and hasn't been any changes. My understanding is that at the public hearing of the supervisors, there was no other changes made by them either. So the draft of 525 is the last draft that's been in front of the supervisors. So that draft is coming in front of the planning commission to vote on. Whether or not they recommend it is not for me to decide. If they vote to recommend it, one of the legal questions that was raised, in my opinion, in my conversations with the attorney for the Donegal Freedom Group, is no longer an issue in front of the court, so we move on to the next issue. That doesn't mean the lawsuit's done, that doesn't mean that it doesn't move forward, still might have the hearing date. Supervisors may depose, other parties may be deposed, but my understanding is that, at least as far as the question is concerned with the planning commission role, is alleviated.
Is there, shouldn't the, I guess why not, why doesn't the draft and the map have the same date? Was there another version after?
No, the draft was sent to me in Word form when we got it from EPD back in, I never got a copy of the zoning map in a form that I could manipulate. Emailed, asked for it, never ended up getting it, so had to hand make that after, at the end of May. At the same time, I was trying to get a hold of EPD to see if I could get a copy of the map. It's not in it sent to me in a PDF form, couldn't manipulate that. Don't have a program, I don't know how they do mapping. My thought would be that hopefully they could eventually get that to the township so that if this ever gets approved and there are changes down the road, you don't have to, be hand figuring it out. But that's essentially why there's essentially a two-week delay. Was trying to get that from EPD, never got it, needed to send it. That's what happened.
Last, certainly not least,
Mhm.
I would ask the board, address you, address the chairman. Since there is so much confusion and say it's clear as mud, I would ask that you address the board or go on the record, or the chairman, to ask each individual member to do a roll call vote as to what members have read this proposal that's in front of them, the draft, in its entirety, front to back, before they take a vote, and do a roll call vote to see which members have read it in its entirety, front to back, and which have not, before they vote. Don't you think that would be a proper?
It's not in the MPC, but if they choose to do so, they're more than welcome to do that. I don't think it's out of line to request that. It's not from a legal standpoint, I don't think it's required in order to move it forward, but
I think it would be a good thing, with all things considered, with all the controversy and everything going on with it.
Well, did the planning commission understand they were supposed to review it again for tonight? Because I don't think I understood from the supervisors meeting that that's what they were supposed to do.
I can't speak on behalf of the planning commission members.
Actually, I believe we were supposed to review it when we got it, May 25th. We should have all read it.
But at that point, you'd already passed it on to the supervisors. What was the point of reviewing what was already passed on?
Because if it wasn't the corrections that we thought we were putting in there, we still had the opportunity to fix it.
No, you don't. Once it's passed on, it's passed on.
Well, we would have had the opportunity at the public hearing to make public comment that we.
But you
felt
would
that
be
there was
speaking
some-
then as a resident, not as a planning commission member.
We had no citizens' comments at the public hearing suggesting changes other than the ones from the rifle range. And to say that this was not correct or was correct, and nobody said it wasn't correct. Nobody said that there were changes that weren't made, that should have been made. The opportunity was given. We've given dozens and dozens of opportunities over the last almost 2 years. I think the motion's on the floor, there's a second. I'm gonna call for a vote.
Vote has been called for. I'm calling for the vote. Doug?
Yes.
Is this
Jeff?
the vote to put it through, or who read it and who did not?
This is the vote to put it through.
Okay, you're not going to
No.
do any particular reason, or just because you haven't read it?
Point of order, we're in the middle of voting.
No.
No? Kathy?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes. Yes.
Jody?
No.
Jerry?
No.
I vote yes. 4-3, motion carried. Motion to adjourn,
I'll move with adjourn.
second.
I'll second.
Lee, since you were the deciding factor, did you read this in its entirety front to back?
Calling for a vote to adjourn. Doug?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Kathy? Bob?
Yes.
Jody?
Yes.
Jerry?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Meeting is adjourned.
I've got the agenda in there for
Nice stuff, you can compare it with the documents.
Township has 6 o'clock.
Thank you.
So she requested.
I just didn't know you were.
I didn't even consent. For what? Township funds.
No, they can go, they can really go anywhere. All the time.